Hello and welcome to my easy to understand guide to the music video A Little Bit of Love by Tom Grennan. This music video is going to be particularly relevant for you if you are studying Eduqas A-Level Media Studies as it appears on the specification for exams from 2024 onwards. This video is going to focus in particular on representation. There's this quite unusual camera shot here, which is a kind of rotating camera shot, but it's also a kind of angled camera shot, which some people call a Dutch tilt and some people call it canted angle. But either way, it's very much used to show this kind of chaos and instability within his life. There's a lot of cool blue tones here, and this kind of colour grading of the music video makes it feel kind of quite realistic and gritty and adds to this feeling of the genre of social realism. And of course, the representations are also going to be influenced by the fact that this is part of the kind of indie genre. And indie genre products often do represent things in a more kind of gritty, quite negative or difficult fashion. We see a montage here of the two brothers in the narrative. There's lots of close-ups, lots of images of them smiling and hugging, and that really represents them as being very close, having a great bond as brothers, loving each other. And perhaps this representation of men being close is quite unusual because often media products represent men as having to be quite emotionally restrained. And so showing this real emotion and connection is perhaps unconventional. There are lots of close-ups of Tom Grennan in the music video, which is quite conventional for a music video anyway, but it also helps to represent him as being very important and central to the video. The locations used here, again, are quite gritty and real in style. There's an estate, tower block, it's very urban, it seems very working class. It's not a studio, which is often what's used in many music videos, so it adds to this representation of kind of realism within the video. Tom's facial expressions in these shots are really quite anguished. There's a lot of emotion on them. He seems quite angry. And again, this idea of men showing emotion is perhaps less conventional, although the angry and aggressive facial expressions are perhaps more conventional way of representing men. The reverse shot here of the boy with the swimming on the television perhaps represents this idea. It helps us to see, like, is this what he's dreaming of? Is this something he wants from his future? So it draws our attention to what he loves and what he wants to do. The montage of the two brothers training emphasises the fact that they have very little money, they can't afford to go to a real swimming pool or get real swimming lessons, but it also helps to show us, the audience, how close they are and how supportive and encouraging the older brother is. We see some men outside on the streets near some shutters, and they're all in hooded clothes, and these hooded clothes are often acting as symbolic codes to kind of represent them in quite a negative, almost criminal way. That's how we often associate things with hoods. So it creates this idea of stereotypes that are easy to understand. We immediately recognise that these characters are perhaps dangerous. There's some handheld shots here which give the kind of impression that everything's very chaotic and fast-paced and you know, all over the place. We get shots of the dad shoving and scaring the son, and it creates this representation of being quite scary and intimidating. And it makes us feel as though we are there as well. There's a use of a red light here during some of the performance stuff, and that perhaps represents him and his growing anger when thinking about the past. We see some fast-paced editing here of the dad scrabbling for all the money, and that really makes him seem desperate. It really represents him as really needing the money and being focused on financial issues. And the close-up here of the boy's face makes him seem very, very scared, and shows the fear that he has for the situation. The montage of soft focus flashbacks here show that the older brother can't help but think about the good relationship he had with his younger brother. And the harsh insert shots of the men fighting, punching, etc. emphasise the idea of masculinity and aggression, and also the fear that this older brother is living with. But of course, then we get this quite intimidating scene with the brick coming through the window and a warning on it, and the camera tracks around the men threatening the man, and this all adds tension and fear, and the long take really adds to this idea of tension and really signifies that he's trying to think about what he can possibly do. When we see the dad chucking the bag, we see some fast-paced jump cuts here. There's getting his son and running down the street, and we get some low angles of the dad and the son here as well. It makes the dad feel quite powerful and dominant, and it makes us as an audience see him in more of a positive fashion at this point. And they rip their tops off and they jump into the water, and it's that idea that representing them as being quite brave and free. We do get a track into them at night, and there's a kind of spotlight on them, and it's quite low key, and that's quite scary and mysterious, so perhaps does imply that there's some kind of danger still. There's money drying on the line, this idea that he has still dried out all this money, and perhaps representing the issue of consumerism and capitalist culture as being quite negative and always being there and always being important, something that we can't ignore. These representations are going to be quite relatable to a lot of audiences, particularly from working class backgrounds, who are going to very clearly understand what it's like to live with financial struggles, particularly in the context of the current climate where so many people are struggling financially. The fact that the singer Tom Grennan is part of the narrative represents him as being connected to the story, and perhaps represents him as showing us part of his life. Individual producers can also have an impact on representations. The director of this video chose deliberately to avoid a typical romantic narrative and focus on a family narrative between two brothers instead. He deliberately wanted to tackle the themes of toxic masculinity. The video really shows men's struggles with things like masculinity, toxic masculinity in particular, and the fact that that is typically underrepresented, this idea of men being emotional and having struggles and needing support, needing help, that is typically underrepresented within the media. So this is quite unusual to show the real emotional and financial struggles that people go through and the way that men deal with this. Children within the video are obviously shown as being more innocent, more hopeful, having dreams for the future, suffering at the hands of adults, perhaps the adults who have financial struggles, feeling that they don't have what they need in life, and also suffering at the hands of other adults who think, commit crimes or who coerce people into criminal lifestyles. In the video, it's the children that are the ones that are sort of represented as the more innocent victims. The kind of anger and the crime that the dad is committing in this video, and the criminal lifestyle that he seems to have been kind of forced into, some might argue that it's represented in quite a kind of romanticised way, sort of showing that he couldn't help it, he had no choice. And so some perhaps might see this representation as making excuses for criminal behaviour. So that was my easy to understand guide to Tom Grennan's video. Don't forget to check out my channel for other videos that are going to be relevant for you. And if you would like a video that I don't already have, just leave a little comment below and I'll see what I can do.